Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of True Detective Episode 3. Make sure after this review to check out my brand new interview, which will be linked in the description and in the comments, with the actors of Lee and Kayla. It's a really fun time. We talk everything that's happened so far. Now, this episode opens with a flashback of Navarro, and what's interesting, it's the first time she actually met Annie, and this is when Annie was having a birthing center happen at the mine. And we get to see Annie as a midwife, which we have learned already, but it explains more having this moment we see where Navarro is part of this woman's birth here, that she is invited to hold hands with them while this is happening, sees Annie revives the child, that it would develop a deeper connection for Navarro when she found Annie dead, why it would really piss off Navarro. Now, in present day, the worst person to be leading the search for Clark is leading it, which is Hank, and he's bringing in civilians with guns, which is always a great idea. And I thought it was interesting that the way Hank is talking about, let's get this guy, and they already have this hostile attitude towards Clark. I know they found this trailer that was very crazy looking, but there's still no physical evidence of wrongdoing by Clark. So I wonder if they end up finding Clark in this show, that's going to be a conflict here where someone like a Hank's going to want him just destroyed and not listen to it all. So I think that's kind of foreshadowing a problem that could arise. I also thought it was interesting that one of the men had a bag of oranges. He drops one of the oranges that Navarro will pick up, and we'll see in a scene later on in the episode in the ice where Navarro throws the orange, and then it mysteriously just reappears at her foot. The orange is also in the opening credits where it is seen underwater, but it's peeled. So give your theories now about this orange. What's going on with this orange? Because there's clearly some significance here. Now, where I feel like we get True Detective at its best is in flashbacks that are very mysterious about our main characters, and that happens here when Peter asks Danvers again about what really happened with you and Navarro, and asks about the Wheeler case, because that's the last case they worked together, and things were never the same after that. Now, this is a classic scene of an unreliable narrator in Danvers. She's saying one thing to Peter, but we're seeing a different thing on the screen. She tells Peter that William Wheeler was a murder-suicide case, which is probably true in the records. But in this scene, visually, we never see him actually kill himself. But we learned about this character of William Wheeler that he beat his 18-year-old girlfriend. He had a huge criminal record prior, and she would not report it to the police. So this is something that was frustrating as a cop, where you know eventually this will get worse and worse and lead to a horrible day like this where she's murdered. This also brilliantly connects to Danvers in the next scene, seeing the bruise on Peter, and she knows damn well Hank hit him because she says, wow, a hockey star falling on the ice, knowing he's too good of a skater for that to be the reason. She has that motherly relationship with him and touches him on the cheek there. It's very sad, and someone like Danvers knows what the deal is right away. So don't think she's not catching on to Hank more and more and what he is as a person. But it's interesting, this character of Wheeler looked possessed like Clark did when they had run into him. We don't get to see what happened there and how Navarro and Danvers handled it, but this is where Danvers is telling Peter that Navarro's was convinced of something they should have done, blamed Danvers, and it got nasty. But we didn't get the full story here from Danvers, so it's a nice little tease to that moment. We got a little more visually to see, but it's interesting. Who knows what happened there between Navarro and Danvers, but it's going to be huge and important in what happened with Wheeler at the end of the day. This guy definitely didn't kill himself. Danvers gets a funny line here where she tells Peter, go tell your dad to get rid of his hillbilly friends, or I'm going to call immigration on his Russian mail order bride. I thought that was great. There's a lot of funny lines in this episode, some of the best humor in the show so far. And I'll point out a couple more later on. Now we get another great detective scene where this season's doing a good job at keeping us feel like we're a detective on the case, putting the clues together like Navarro and Danvers are, and what was exciting about this episode is seeing them work together. They're looking at all the evidence from Clark's trailer. Now we learn a lot here. Danvers can tell by the Ariana Grande shirt that Annie is wearing that this relationship started a while back. This wasn't a new relationship. She also connects through the photos being candid, some of them, that someone else knew about this relationship, but the big mystery still looming in the show is why they kept the relationship a secret. So I'd love to hear theories on that. But they find the blue hair dye in one of the photos This leads Navarro to going to Susan, who did Annie's hair. So we find out Susan was the person taking these photos. Susan knew of this relationship. At first, Navarro's heated because she's like, why didn't you tell me about this relationship in Annie's case? But she did tell the police. She reported it to Hank. Makes Hank extra suspicious now. He already was, but this is just looking worse and worse for Hank here. And Navarro's the one who will connect him to the mines. But that's where Danvers in this episode is going to slow Navarro down and be like, there's other things connected to this mine too. We have to focus on the case at hand, which is the researchers, them being in the ice, and how the mine is a big issue to the whole town, right? Because 50% of the population works for the mine. So that means there's 50% of the people who would want to shut up Annie. But remember, we know Navarro has a great instinct. It's just that she wants to run in it quick, where Danvers will always slow down, which actually works well as a pairing here. But you see how they behave with each other. It's very Rust and Marty from season 1, with Danvers being more of a Marty type and Navarro being more of a Rust type. It's also interesting that Susan mentioned that she had no knowledge of Clark being violent, so I think that's leading more and more to that. I think Clark is a little bit of a red herring. But we learned of this character, Oliver, that Susan was dating, that was someone who was working at the research center as an equipment engineer, and he left right before Annie died, which is interesting. And there's so many mysteries to this, like Danvers pointing out too that Annie's tongue popped up 6 years later. Danvers is scoffing at the idea of any supernatural or magic being involved and laughing at Navarro possibly hinting at that. I was also shocked at this line where Danvers asks Navarro, what do you do when you're lonely? And she says, I watch Netflix. So I'm shocked because hearing Netflix mentioned in an HBO show is always like, whoa, the competition. But I think it's different times now, this tells me. This is so industry me going into this, but just knowing that HBO is selling a lot of their content now to Netflix makes me think that that relationship isn't as competitive as you might think. It might be more friendly, that they'd even allow Netflix plugged on this HBO show. But you see, she says a very Rust type line where she's like, you ever get this feeling you want to disappear? Just walk out, just go. So it makes Danvers uncomfortable. It's that pessimistic type character line that is that uncomfortable truth, maybe, that obviously Danvers is relating to. That's why it's making her uncomfortable, that she's definitely felt that way. And it's a theme just about this town and Ennis and people who want to go walking out into the ice, but there's more to this, them disappearing. So it's like the character of Travis. So it's a lot of stuff here. It's interesting, and you're kind of trying to connect it all, not just through the case, but spiritually and themes of the show. Now we'll see Hank go to Peter and give him skates Peter used to skate in, and it's for Darwin. It's almost like a band-aid to his relationship with his son. He doesn't want to lose Peter to Danvers more and more. He knows he hit him, but this is him kind of checking bases. It's a way of keeping him close. But you'll see that Navarro and Danvers will confront Hank about his negligence to that report from Susan. And you see Danvers says she will file a report if he doesn't get rid of his hillbilly friends on the case. And he says, maybe I will file a report on you playing Miss Robinson with my kid. Got her. But then she throws coffee in his face, and Peter goes, who's Miss Robinson? I almost wish he just cut out on that moment because it was hysterical. I love that line. Now Navarro will go follow up on finding out who Oliver is through Javi and go to his ice shanty. Really cool seeing the ice fishing as well. That's something I actually seeing this want to really do now. But he wants a quid pro quo for info on Oliver. He just wants to know more about Navarro, where she puts up this shield to him. But she'll actually cave, opens up about her mom. We learned through this that she was a local, then the family moved to Boston, and that the dad was abusive, hit the mom, hit Navarro, and hit her sister. So they ran and came back to Alaska, but the mom wasn't okay. She was hearing voices, episodes. So it connects to that theme that Rose was talking about, is it visions that the mom was having, real visions, or is this just mental illness? This is a big just theme of the show and mystery of the show, right? How much of it is supernatural, how much of it is mental illness? And you can even connect that to the last shot with Navarro and Lund. Is she really seeing Lund possess, or is this part of Navarro's mental illness? She hasn't dealt with her trauma. Maybe she's more like her mom and her sister than she thinks. But we learned the mom ran away one day and never came back. She was killed and the killer was never found. This really gives you that explanation why Navarro really wants to, at the end of the day, protect women. And we also learn Navarro was never told her indigenous name, so this will get payoff later on when she meets Oliver and he's asking her about her name, and she has no answer. So it's going to develop more and more. You're seeing as the show goes on, Navarro interested but also facing her roots now, and like the character of Lee, who's going full in on that Navarro's slowly going to face that. And this is setting up well when Lund, who is possessed, will say to Navarro later on, your mother says hello. She's waiting for you. So it's that afterlife connection here. Now, when Lee comes back from being at this mine rally, Danvers wants her to wipe that paint off her face. So she is literally coming from looking at photos of looking at Annie with the marks on her face. So she does not want what happened to Annie to happen to her. She doesn't want to be reminded all the time about what happened with Annie. And you see how she's scared at Lee mentioning being at the mine rally. She's like, do you know what happens to those people at that place? So that is her being this protective mom. She does not want Lee to go down the route of Annie. I have a feeling there is a character in the show that is also going to die soon that's going to be important, and it might be Lee. It's leaning towards that, but maybe that's too easy. We'll see. Now, it's interesting when Navarro's out on the ice, we hear these sounds of women, but it's hard to tell if this is just for us to hear. Is Navarro also hearing this? And it's making you think of the spirits that are alluded to and her mom. But she also sees Holden with a polar bear doll. And then she falls on the ice and she's back at this military site because we know she has a military past. But Holden grabs her here and says, get my mommy. Now, it's important to note that Navarro gets a call that Julia at work was screaming someone is coming. So this is definitely the spirit she's sensing that will eventually come to possess Lund. So all this is very, very Stephen King's vibe now. And I also wonder, Julia will go and run and find comfort sitting at this boat out on the ice. And that is somewhere Navarro will assume she's at. So it means a lot to both of them. I'm assuming that boat is some time they spent a lot with their mother. And that could be an important area too, and something in their past. So we'll see. Now we'll see Pete put Darwin to sleep. You see there is a spiral on his pillowcase, and of course he has a polar bear blanket. And we learn about Kayla, his wife, that she's sick of the time Peter is away. So much time, and that he's not this sweet idiot kid anymore. He's becoming fully into his job, invested into it. But he brings up that she might be jealous of Danvers. But she's definitely a mix of that. In my interview with the actress, she'll break down her thinking on all of this, which is really fascinating. So you want to check that out. But the big part of this I'm seeing is that she's also seeing that Peter is getting hardened now. And that is a big character change in Peter from where he started as this more aloof, innocent cop on the job to being more hardened by the job. There's another powerful scene here where Danvers will go to the gathering for the indigenous woman who lost her baby. She was told this by Lee. And the big moment is when she looks in the mirror at herself, Danvers. So again, there's something she's not letting on about all of this. But the water is black in the sink. So this is the big connection. It's her facing the inconvenient truth of what's going on in this town because of the mine with the black water. And black water is going to be more and more important. I think there's going to be a lot of theories going on too about is the black water making people act a certain way. We'll see. Now, Peter will have his cousin come, who is a vet, look at the corpsicle. He says he thinks they died before they froze. They didn't freeze to death. He says he thinks it's cardiac arrest. And he compares it to caribou he's seen dying of complete fright. So he really thinks their fright is what caused their death. Now Danvers starts saying, Vince, if you can do a tiny bit of post-mortem, and this is where Peter stops her, and she's like, oh, sorry, that would be super illegal. We know Danvers. We know that she'll go the line. We'll literally see in the following scene when they go to Oliver's place and knock that she acts like he answered so they can get in there without it looking bad. So she's someone willing to break the law, so I'm sure we're going to see Vince again, no doubt. But it's interesting that this basically confirms that they did not freeze to death. So that's going to be important. And on that scene where Danvers and Navarro will go see Oliver, they're greeted by him sitting with a shotgun. But this is the first time he's hearing of the death of his colleagues at the research center. And it's important that Lund is dead is what he says first. So that is the most important person to him there. So why? Why is it Lund? And it's important because Lund is the character we're getting the most time with. He's, besides Clark, as we know, is the only one who is still alive, if Clark is still alive. And speaking of Lund, we'll see he wakes up. He's in and out of it. He's got gangrene. He's got the double amputations. They might have to cut off his other arm. He's in bad shape, and he can barely see as well. And he says to Danvers, we woke her. Now she's out there in the ice. She came for us in the dark. So whatever this entity is, they all think they saw. Or did they see? And this is triggering Navarro because she's thinking of when she saw the polar bear in the road and she heard on the radio she's awake. Now, what didn't work for me, which was a little too convenient timing-wise and a little silly, was Hank's hillbilly civilians coming in right then and fighting the policeman in the hospital. It's like, all right, and then Danvers has to break it up. It was just kind of goofy, that whole part. But it was all to just get Danvers out of the room so Navarro could have that moment with Lund. I just wish there was a less silly way they went about that to get to that. Because they don't even address it again with all those hillbillies and the cops when a minute later they go see Peter. So it just was a little sloppy, which was unlike this show so far. But there's this big moment, and it's full-on Stephen King in this moment where Lund comes up and he is clearly possessed. And he says, hello, Evangeline. Your mother says hello. She's waiting for you, and points. So it's still in the moment, though, where maybe people are turned off by this because, like, oh, is this really going full supernatural now? But I'm not there yet because Navarro could be hallucinating his possession here. There's nobody else in the room with them. The nurse left too, so it could just be her imagining him saying that. And like I said, maybe she's more like her sister than she thinks, and her mother. So it's really fascinating stuff. Now, Pete cracked Annie's phone. I would have liked to see how he did that, though. That was set up in the beginning of the episode that is what Danvers wanted him to do, but we actually never saw him do it. Again, not really something this show has done yet either. They've been good on showing you stuff like that happen that, I would be interested to see how he cracked Annie's phone. Maybe we'll see it in the next episode, but that was a little bothersome to me that we didn't get to see that. I'd like to see how he did it. But we see in this video on her phone that she's like, I found it. It's here with ice behind her, and you hear a bang, and then she's screaming, and this is like full Blair Witch effect here. But this has to be this entity. Something is going on here. It's still really good mystery with this. And I like that the case isn't just going as the case about Annie or the case about the research center men. It's literally bigger than both, and it's all connected to this even bigger mystery. So that's really working for me here. So overall, I still really enjoyed this episode, but it was just by a little bit my least favorite of the first three so far, just because of those things I point out. They're a little more sloppier, and maybe I'm getting a little scared that it's going too supernatural, but we'll see, because this could also be just a tease of supernatural. I still think they're doing a good job at keeping it that it could be all hallucinations and scientific based. But I still really, really loved it, and I'm going to give this one a 9.2. It still is so much more we're learning about the characters. There's still great mystery here. It's still got great pace to it, and obviously strong cinematography, and it still has that HBO quality to it, which I really, really love. And I'm excited because there's only 6 episodes, so I don't feel like anything's going to be dragged out here, and it's giving us enough answers to make us not feel like we're just getting a bunch of questions, which can be a problem with a lot of mystery shows. So I'm excited. We only got 3 episodes left, and I feel like next episode is going to have a big reveal, and I think it's going to have to do more and more with Danvers now, because we got a lot of information on Navarro in this episode, and so I feel like we're going to lean more and more into Danvers next episode. So we'll see. But I'd love to hear your guys' theories on this. I read every comment, try to respond as many as I can. And please check out my brand new interview with Isabella LeBlanc, who plays Lee, and Anna Lamb, who plays Kayla. We break down everything that's happened in the show so far, including this episode. So it's a really fascinating interview. You can kind of take some clues from maybe stuff they say in the interview, so you're going to want to see that. And please subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews or interviews for True Detective, and I'll see you next time.